There comes a moment in your inner evolution when something subtle but irreversible begins to shift. You start noticing that you are no longer fully merged with the thoughts running through your mind. Instead of being swept away by every fear, every memory, every projection, you begin to sense a quiet space behind them, a space that watches, a space that listens, a space that observes without reacting. This moment is not dramatic, yet it changes the trajectory of your entire life. It is the moment you step into the observer. The observer is the part of you that thoughts cannot touch. It is the awareness that exists before the mind speaks. It is the silent witness that has been present in every moment of your life, even when you were lost in the noise of your inner world. And when you begin shifting into this observing consciousness, your entire perception changes. You stop believing every thought. You stop drowning in emotional spirals. You stop treating your inner commentary as truth. Instead, you watch it all rise and fall like waves on the surface of an infinite ocean. This is the beginning of true awakening, and this message finds you precisely because you are stepping into that awakening now. You are beginning to realize that the mind is not who you are. It is a tool, a narrator, an echo of your conditioning. But you are the one who hears the mind. You are the one who sees the thoughts. You are the one who remains when the stories dissolve. The reason you found this message in this exact moment is that your consciousness has reached the threshold where the observer becomes visible. For years, perhaps your entire life, you have lived inside the stream of thought, believing that being alive meant thinking, reacting, analyzing, controlling. But life is not happening inside the mind. Life is happening in the awareness that notices the mind. And now that you have begun sensing this awareness, something extraordinary is unfolding. You may feel a strange distance from your usual emotional triggers. Things that used to consume your mental space now pass through you without the same intensity. You may notice that you can pause before reacting. You may sense that your inner world feels more spacious, more quiet, even when the circumstances around you have not changed. That spaciousness is not emptiness. It is you meeting yourself beyond the noise. This message appears in your path because you are entering a new stage of consciousness, one where you no longer live as the thinker, but as the witness. And from this point on, your life will no longer unfold in the same way. The observer changes everything. As you begin stepping into the observer, you may notice that your inner world reorganizes itself in ways that feel both unfamiliar and strangely natural. The emotions that once overwhelmed you become easier to hold. The thoughts that once controlled you lose their authority. The patterns that once repeated endlessly begin unraveling, as if they no longer have a place in your awareness. This is because the observer does not resist your inner experience. It simply sees it. And in that seeing, something powerful happens. The unconscious becomes conscious. You start recognizing the difference between what you feel and the story you attach to those feelings. You begin noticing how often your mind exaggerates, dramatizes, or distorts reality in order to maintain old patterns of fear or control. And instead of being captured by this narration, you begin witnessing it from a place of clarity. When you step into the observer, the mind loses its ability to trap you. It may continue talking, but its words no longer define you. Its fears no longer dictate your choices. Its assumptions no longer shape your identity. You start experiencing a freedom that does not come from changing your external circumstances, but from no longer being imprisoned by your internal reactions. In this stage, life may feel quieter, not because there is less happening around you, but because you are no longer tangled in every moment. You are watching from a higher vantage point. You are noticing the flow rather than drowning in it. You may feel an increased sense of neutrality, not indifference but clarity. You respond instead of react. You feel instead of collapse. You observe instead of becoming entangled. This neutrality is a sign of mastery. It means your consciousness is no longer fused with the contents of the mind. You are reclaiming your true position as the one who sees, and this is why this message has reached you now. Only those who have begun shifting into the observer can truly understand the meaning of these words. When you are fully identified with the mind, a message like this feels distant, abstract, almost impossible to grasp. But once you take even a single step into the awareness behind thought, these words feel like they are describing something you already know. Because the observer is not new, it is ancient. It is the core of who you are. You are not learning something new, you are remembering. And as this remembering unfolds, the world around you begins responding to your new level of consciousness. Situations feel easier to navigate. People react differently to your presence. Life seems to slow down, allowing you to move with intention rather than urgency. All of this is the ripple effect of stepping into the observer, and this message finds you now because you are ready to go even deeper. One of the first major transformations that happens when you step into the observer is the unraveling of your emotional reactivity. You start noticing that emotions no longer pull you with the same intensity. Anger arises, but you can see it forming instead of becoming it. Sadness appears, but you watch it move through you like a passing cloud. Anxiety still tries to take shape, but you can sense its beginning before it consumes your entire field of awareness. This shift is not emotional suppression. It is emotional sovereignty. You are not pushing feelings away. You are simply watching them without losing yourself inside them. This ability changes everything. When you lived identified with the mind, emotions controlled you. They told you how to act, what to fear, what to avoid, what to chase. You thought you were making choices, but in truth, you were reacting. The observer breaks that cycle. The observer allows emotions to exist without dominating your identity. You begin to understand that emotions are not commands. They are signals. They are energetic movements rising from within you, shaped by memory, conditioning, habits, and accumulated experience. But when you watch them instead of fusing with them, they lose their power to dictate your life. This stage often feels like gaining a new form of vision. You start seeing your internal world with a clarity you never had before. You begin noticing the exact moment when your mind tries to create a story around a feeling. You watch the moment where fear tries to wrap itself in logic. You see how the mind attempts to amplify discomfort into catastrophe. And for the first time, you can separate the raw emotion from the mental narrative it usually triggers. That separation is liberation. You no longer spiral emotionally because you stop feeding the spiral with thought. You no longer escalate small discomforts into overwhelming responses because you observe the early flicker instead of reacting to the flame. And in this newfound clarity, something else emerges: compassion. You start feeling compassion for your past self, the one who lived lost inside every emotional wave. You recognize that every reaction, every fear, every outburst was simply a survival mechanism. And now that you are stepping into the observer, you can hold yourself gently through the transitions instead of judging yourself for them. This message finds you because you are ready to elevate your relationship with your emotions. You are ready to stop being a prisoner of your internal weather and become the sky that holds it. The sky is never shaken by the storms inside it, and neither is the observer. When you step into this awareness, emotional reactivity dissolves, and emotional understanding takes its place. This is one of the most profound signs that awakening is truly unfolding in your life. As your identity shifts from the thinker to the observer, your relationship with your thoughts undergoes a radical transformation. Thoughts that once felt absolute now appear as temporary formations, arising and dissolving within your awareness. You start noticing how repetitive your mental patterns are. The same fears disguised in new words, the same worries replaying with different scenarios, the same assumptions appearing in slightly altered shapes. When you lived inside the mind, these thoughts felt like truth. They carried authority. They dictated your mood, your choices, your self-image. But once you begin observing them, they lose their solidity. You realize they are not facts. They are echoes. Echoes of old conditioning, old memories, old survival patterns. And as you deepen into the observer, the illusion of mental control begins to collapse. Thoughts no longer feel like commands. They feel like suggestions. They arise, they speak, they attempt to convince you, but you can sense the space between you and them. That space is your freedom. In that space, you begin choosing which thoughts receive your attention and which ones dissolve without engagement. You learn that you do not have to believe everything you think. You learn that you do not have to follow every mental impulse. You learn that awareness, not thought, is the true source of clarity. And once you experience this separation, your inner world becomes much quieter. Not silent, but uncluttered. Even when the mind is active, it no longer overwhelms you, because you are no longer merging with every thought that passes through. Instead, you watch them rise and fall like waves, aware that you are the ocean beneath them. This shift also exposes how often the mind fabricates problems that do not exist. You begin noticing how much suffering comes from imagined scenarios, exaggerated fears, or misinterpreted assumptions. You see how the mind creates tension, conflict, and anxiety simply to maintain its own relevance. But the observer does not engage with these mental inventions. It sees them as mental weather, not reality. And the more time you spend in this perspective, the more the mind begins to calm naturally, not because you force it, but because it no longer has the power to control your state. This is why your inner world begins feeling more spacious. Thought loses its grip. Awareness takes its rightful place. This message comes into your life now because you are entering, consciously or not, this new dimension of perception. You are ready to stop living as the thinker and start living as the one who sees the thinking. The moment this awareness stabilizes, your entire life will operate from a higher level of consciousness. The observer is not an improvement to your mind. It is your return to your true nature, and you are already stepping into it. As the observer within you strengthens, something subtle but unmistakable begins to shift in the way you perceive others. You start noticing their emotional patterns, their thought loops, their unconscious reactions, with a level of clarity you never had before. It becomes easier to see when someone is speaking from fear rather than truth, from conditioning rather than awareness, from old wounds rather than intention. You begin sensing the emotional charge behind their words, the narratives beneath their behavior, the stories they carry without realizing it. This does not make you judgmental. It makes you compassionate, because what you now see so clearly in others is what you once lived unconsciously within yourself. When you step into the observer, you do not simply awaken to your own inner world. You awaken to the inner worlds of those around you. You begin understanding that most people are not acting with deliberate awareness. They are reacting. They are echoing past experiences. They are replaying emotional memories. They are responding from survival patterns rather than choice. And this awareness softens your heart. You stop taking things personally. Someone's anger no longer hooks you because you see the pain behind it. Someone's impatience no longer irritates you because you sense their internal pressure. Someone's coldness no longer wounds you because you perceive their fear. This shift allows you to remain centered even when others are not. You become grounded in clarity rather than pulled into reactivity. Your presence becomes stabilizing, soothing, calm. People may even begin to feel safer around you without knowing why. They sense your stillness. They feel your neutrality. They unconsciously recognize that you are no longer participating in the chaos of emotional entanglement. And in your presence, their nervous systems begin to soften. This is the power of the observer. Your state becomes a regulating force for the environment around you. You stop matching energies and instead begin influencing them. You stop absorbing people's moods and start radiating your own clarity. You stop being shaped by external noise and begin shaping the field with your inner stillness. This transformation affects every area of your life. Conversations become smoother. Conflicts lose their intensity. Relationships become more authentic because you begin responding from awareness rather than reacting from old wounds. Even silence becomes more meaningful. You start recognizing the space between words, the energy beneath interactions, the truth behind the surface. And all of this happens not because you are trying to understand others, but because by observing yourself, you naturally expand your capacity to observe everything else. This message reaches you now because you are entering a stage where your inner clarity will begin transforming your outer world. As you continue stepping into the observer, your relationships will shift, your environment will change, and your presence will carry a new resonance that others can feel even before you speak. This is how consciousness moves through you. As your awareness expands, something even more profound begins to unfold. You realize that life itself becomes easier to navigate, not because your circumstances suddenly become perfect, but because you stop resisting the moment. Resistance was the default mode of the old self. It resisted feelings, resisted uncertainty, resisted change, resisted discomfort. It tried to control what it feared. It tried to predict what it could not understand. It tried to force outcomes that were misaligned. But the observer does not operate through resistance. The observer flows. It allows. It sees what is in front of it without labeling it as good or bad, welcome or unwelcome. And when you stop resisting the present moment, a deep sense of freedom emerges. You begin to notice how much of your suffering was created not by life itself, but by your mind's reaction to life. You suffered not because of the feeling, but because of the story the mind told about the feeling. You suffered not because of uncertainty, but because the mind demanded certainty. You suffered not because change occurred, but because the mind clung to what felt familiar. The observer breaks this cycle by removing the story from the experience. You begin feeling emotions directly instead of through the mind's interpretation. A feeling of sadness becomes simply sadness, not a catastrophe. A moment of fear becomes simply fear, not a prediction of danger. An uncomfortable situation becomes simply discomfort, not evidence that something is wrong. When you experience life without the added weight of mental resistance, everything becomes lighter. Your internal world becomes more spacious. You can breathe again. And the moment the mind stops fighting reality, clarity begins to flow. You suddenly know what to do without thinking. You act without hesitation because your actions come from alignment rather than fear. Your intuition becomes remarkably precise, guiding you not with dramatic intensity, but with quiet certainty. This is the intelligence of awareness. It does not shout, it does not panic, it does not overanalyze. It moves like water, adjusting, adapting, flowing around obstacles rather than resisting them. And the more you live from this awareness, the more you notice that life meets you differently. Opportunities appear without force. Solutions arrive without strain. People respond to you in unexpected ways. Synchronicities increase as your inner state aligns with the flow of reality. This effortless way of living is not luck. It is the natural result of stepping into the observer. When you stop resisting life, life stops resisting you. And this message finds you now because you are ready to step into this deeper flow. You are ready to let go of the mind's constant struggle and return to the natural intelligence of awareness. The observer is already awakening in you, and the next phase of your journey will unfold through this new way of being. Another profound shift happens when you step into the observer, the collapse of your old identity. You begin to realize that the person you thought you were was never fixed. It was a collection of memories, beliefs, emotional patterns, external expectations, and conditioned responses. You were living inside a narrative about who you believed you had to be. But when awareness begins witnessing the mind instead of merging with it, the narrative loses its solidity. You start sensing that you are not the roles you play, nor the personality traits you were labeled with, nor the past experiences that shaped your behavior. You are something far more fluid, far more spacious. This can feel both liberating and destabilizing. The liberation comes from recognizing that you are not trapped by your past. You realize you can respond differently than you ever have. You can choose thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that were once impossible. You can rewrite patterns that felt lifelong. But the destabilization comes from losing the familiar sense of who you were. When the false identity dissolves, the mind panics because it no longer has a structure to cling to. It begins asking, who am I without this story? Who am I without these fears? Who am I without this emotional attachment? Who am I without the roles I played for so long? The observer does not answer these questions with a new identity. It answers with presence. It reminds you that who you are does not need a definition. You are awareness itself, the field in which every experience arises and falls. You do not need to become someone. You simply need to see clearly, and the clearer you see, the more your authentic self begins to emerge without effort. You start making choices that align with your inner truth rather than your conditioning. You start speaking in ways that feel natural instead of rehearsed. You start trusting your intuition instead of seeking approval. The collapse of the old identity is not the loss of self, it is the reunion with your real self, the one that existed before fear shaped your behavior, the one that existed before the world taught you who you were supposed to be, the one that exists beneath the layers of labels, desires, insecurities, and beliefs. This message finds you now because you are undergoing this collapse. You can feel it. You sense the old patterns falling away. You sense the internal shift that makes it impossible to return to who you were. You are standing in the doorway between the constructed self and the awakened self, and your only task is to keep observing. Awareness itself will do the rest. As the observer becomes your dominant state, something extraordinary begins to unfold. Your relationship with reality itself transforms. You start noticing that life is not just happening to you. It is responding to you. When you were identified with the mind, every situation felt personal. Every setback felt like punishment. Every challenge felt like a threat. Every delay felt like failure. But from the perspective of the observer, you begin seeing the deeper intelligence behind everything. You notice how moments that once frustrated you now seem perfectly timed. You realize that situations that once triggered you are actually opportunities for clarity and growth. You see how the universe communicates not through dramatic signs, but through subtle adjustments in your external world. A door closes because you are not meant to walk through it. A person leaves because they no longer align with your frequency. A delay appears because something is being rearranged for your benefit. A discomfort arises because something inside you is ready to be released. The observer recognizes that reality mirrors your internal state. When your awareness is clear, life becomes clearer. When your energy is stable, your experiences become smoother. When your consciousness expands, your timeline adjusts. You begin understanding that synchronicities are not coincidences. They are reflections. They appear when your inner and outer worlds begin vibrating in harmony. This harmony increases the more you rest in awareness rather than in fear or thought. You may begin feeling as though you are guided, not through words or visions, but through subtle intuitive pulls. You sense what is right before knowing why. You feel when something is off, even when nothing is visibly wrong. The observer does not need logic to navigate reality. It uses intelligence deeper than thought. And because this awareness is becoming prominent in you, life feels less chaotic. You no longer get caught in the emotional turbulence of every situation. You respond with presence, and reality reorganizes itself around that presence. Even challenges begin to feel different. You face them with clarity instead of panic. You navigate them with groundedness instead of avoidance. You learn to move through life with the understanding that everything you encounter is part of your evolution. And in this understanding, suffering decreases naturally. Not because life becomes perfect, but because your perception transcends the reactive mind. This message finds you because you are entering this stage now. Reality is beginning to reflect your inner awakening, and as you continue stepping into the observer, the alignment between your internal and external worlds will only grow stronger. You are not just witnessing your life, you are shaping it from a higher level of consciousness. As you spend more time anchored in the observer, you begin to experience a radical shift in how you relate to discomfort. You no longer see discomfort as something to escape, suppress, or deny. Instead, you start recognizing it as a doorway. Every uncomfortable emotion, every tension in your body, every moment of inner resistance becomes a message rather than a threat. You begin sensing that discomfort is not here to punish you, but to reveal something. It shows you where you are holding on. It exposes the beliefs you have outgrown. It illuminates the stories the mind has been repeating without question. When you were identified with thought, discomfort felt overwhelming because you were resisting it, while simultaneously feeding it with mental narratives. But from the observer, discomfort becomes simpler. It is simply a sensation, a wave of energy moving through your system. And when you allow that wave to rise and fall without attaching a story to it, the discomfort dissolves more quickly than ever before. This ability to stay present with discomfort is one of the strongest signs of spiritual maturity. It means you are no longer controlled by the mind's avoidance strategies. You are no longer running from your own inner world. You are meeting yourself fully. And something miraculous happens when you do this consistently. The emotional charge of old wounds begins to weaken. Patterns that once triggered you lose their power. Memories that once felt heavy begin to lighten. Even long-standing emotional habits begin to unravel, because you are no longer reinforcing them through unconscious reactions. The observer heals not by fixing, but by seeing. Awareness itself dissolves the grip of old pain because it brings light to what was once buried in darkness. And as this inner healing unfolds, your external life begins to shift as well. You stop attracting situations that reflect unresolved wounds. You stop replaying the same emotional cycles. You stop seeking validation from the places that once failed to give it. You stop abandoning yourself in moments where you used to shrink. This transformation is not something you force. It happens naturally as a result of witnessing your internal world with clarity instead of judgment. Every time you stay present with what arises, you reclaim a piece of yourself that was once hidden. You become whole, not by changing who you are, but by allowing every part of you to be seen. And this message appears in your path now because you are ready to master this deeper level of self-observation. You are ready to see discomfort as guidance rather than punishment. You are ready to evolve from within. The observer is not just awakening in you, it is becoming your foundation. As the observer becomes more stable within you, your relationship with desire undergoes a profound transformation. You begin noticing that many of the things you once wanted now feel strangely distant or irrelevant. Old desires lose their pull, old goals lose their urgency, old fantasies lose their shine. This is not because you have become indifferent or apathetic, but because your desires were often shaped by the unconscious mind, not your true self. Much of what you used to chase came from a place of lack, a desire to be validated, a longing to fit in, a hope that achieving something external would fix an internal emptiness. But as you step deeper into the observer, you begin seeing through these illusions. You realize that you were trying to use external outcomes to regulate internal states. You see how many of your desires were attempts to escape discomfort rather than move toward truth. Awareness dissolves these false motivations, and as the illusions fall away, you may enter a temporary phase where you feel desireless, a neutral space where nothing feels particularly compelling. The mind panics here because it thinks motivation is dying, but in reality, what is dying is the false self, the need-driven self, the approval-seeking self, the self that believed happiness was somewhere out there. When this false layer collapses, the space it leaves behind becomes fertile ground for authentic desire to emerge. Authentic desire is different. It does not come from fear or lack. It does not seek to fill a void. It arises naturally, quietly from the deeper intelligence within you. It feels peaceful instead of urgent. It feels aligned instead of addictive. It feels expansive rather than consuming. This shift is one of the most powerful signs that you are entering a new level of consciousness. You begin wanting only what aligns with your inner truth. You begin moving toward experiences that resonate with your deepest values. You begin prioritizing what nourishes your awareness rather than what feeds your ego. And as your desires purify, your external life becomes more aligned as well. You stop wasting energy on paths that are not meant for you. You stop forcing outcomes that do not feel right. You stop chasing approval, recognition, and empty rewards. Instead, you begin gravitating toward what feels intuitively right, even if you cannot explain why. This is how the observer guides your life. Through resonance, through clarity, through the quiet knowing of what is meant for you. And this message reaches you now because you are entering this sacred purification of desire. What you want is changing because who you are is changing. You are no longer living from the mind. You are living from awareness, and that will transform everything. As the observer becomes the central lens through which you experience life, something extraordinary begins to happen within you. A sense of inner peace emerges that does not depend on external circumstances. This peace is not loud, it is not euphoric, it is not dramatic. It arrives quietly, like a soft light filling a previously dark room. You begin noticing that you can sit with yourself without needing distraction. You begin enjoying silence in ways you never could before. You begin feeling a subtle contentment that has no obvious cause. This is the natural state of awareness. When you are no longer tangled in the mind's noise, you return to the inner stillness that has always been there. The observer is that stillness. The shift into this state of being does not mean your external life becomes perfect. Challenges still arise, uncertainty still appears, emotions still move through you. But your relationship with every experience changes. You no longer collapse into fear. You no longer drown in overwhelm. You no longer get lost in spirals of thought. You watch everything with clarity, allowing it to unfold without resistance. And because of this, suffering decreases. Not because the experiences disappear, but because the unnecessary mental narratives fall away. What remains is a clean, direct experience of life as it is. Even difficult moments feel different. You face them with presence rather than panic. You respond rather than react. You allow the emotion rather than fear it. This is the power of the observer. It frees you from unnecessary suffering by returning you to what is real. And as this awareness stabilizes within you, another transformation emerges. Intuition becomes unmistakable. You begin sensing the right choices before you understand them. You feel the right direction in your body. You recognize the subtle pull toward the people and environments that align with your truth. The observer quiets the mind enough for intuition to speak clearly. And when intuition speaks, life becomes guided. You no longer chase decisions. They arise naturally. You no longer seek answers externally. They reveal themselves internally. This shift creates a new kind of confidence within you. Not the confidence built from ego, validation, or achievement, but a deeper confidence born from trusting your awareness, trusting your perception, trusting the intelligence of your own inner world. And it is precisely because you are entering this stage that this message has found you now. You are stepping into a new way of living, one where awareness becomes your foundation, intuition becomes your compass, and presence becomes your home. The observer is not something you visit, it is becoming who you are. As you reach the final stage of this shift, something profound reveals itself. Stepping into the observer is not just a psychological transition, it is a spiritual initiation. It marks the moment when you stop living as a character inside your mind and begin living as the consciousness that holds your entire existence. This is the moment when your inner world aligns with your true nature. When you step into the observer, you no longer act from fear but from clarity. You no longer live from old narratives but from presence. You no longer search for yourself outside because you finally recognize yourself within. And this recognition changes everything. You begin moving through the world with a grounded sense of peace. You speak with intention instead of reflex. You choose from awareness instead of impulse. You navigate challenges with a calm that surprises even you. Your inner life becomes spacious. Your outer life becomes aligned. And gradually the observer becomes your permanent home rather than a temporary state. From this place, your next chapter begins to form. You will feel new desires arising gently, not from lack, but from alignment. You will attract experiences that resonate with your expanded awareness. You will form connections that match your clarity. You will begin manifesting from consciousness rather than from fear. But before all of that unfolds, you must anchor one truth deeply into your being. Everything you have experienced up to this moment has been preparing you to awaken the observer. Every challenge strengthened your awareness. Every emotion revealed something you needed to see. Every moment of confusion pushed you closer to clarity. Every cycle you repeated taught you how to recognize the mind. And now, the cycle is ending. You are stepping into the version of yourself who no longer lives subconsciously, but consciously, deliberately. Awake. This message did not come to you by accident. It is a mirror reflecting the stage of consciousness you have already entered. And now, before this journey closes, there is one final step. A simple ritual to anchor the observer into your daily life. If these words have awakened something in you, if you feel the truth of this message resonating in your chest, if you recognize that you are stepping into the awareness behind thought, go to the comments and write, "I am the observer." This declaration is not symbolic, it is energetic. It signals to your mind, your nervous system, and your consciousness that you are choosing to live from awareness rather than reactivity. It seals the shift. It grounds the awakening. And from the moment you write it, you step fully into the life that awareness has been preparing for you. Your new chapter begins now. You are the observer. You are awareness. You are free.